What's going on? One, two, three, four. What's the problem? Four. Just waiting to get joined in. About you. Are you what? Are you joining the meeting? Okay. Wait until we get joined.
Hi, everyone. I
Good morning.
recognize that project. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you all doing?
Good. Hey, Scott.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. So I guess all of us are here. Is that it? Is that the total, or are we expecting more people from other departments?
No, this will just be us. I forwarded the questions to the other departments, and Public Works had received that response, and the other departments won't have much comment until there's a full site plan. So
Yeah. Well, so I guess I'll start off by asking, stating what we're trying to determine, which is what is the maximum number of units we can put on this site? Because it has been totally destroyed by fire. There were many non-conforming aspects to it relative to today's code, but there is SB 330, which obviously allows more units if you meet certain criteria. And so I think my questions were fairly clear. The old building obviously extended significantly into the canal water area. Is that something that we can we replicate that, or are we completely prevented from doing that by current regulations?
There's sort of a three-part answer to that. So first, SB 330 is more for identifying our current fees, regulations, et cetera, and locking that in for the formal project. In that SB 330 application, you would want to list any other state laws that you're invoking, state density bonus law, I think in this case being the number one, it sounds like you're wanting to do. Which is great. We've seen that on pretty much every property.
Right.
With state density bonus law, you would be qualified for one incentive and then as many unlimited waivers essentially as it goes. Those waivers, we actually often see waivers being requested. Well, and in fact, for 25 Loch Lomond is a good example. The incentive for that project that they utilized was to not have to comply with the regulations in the plan development district, or excuse me, not have to amend them, and then waivers. Right. And then I don't think we needed any waivers for that. In this case, I think a lot of waivers will definitely be a big part of the project. However, with the caveat that the waivers are related to objective standards essentially in the zoning code. So we can waive things like maximum height, et cetera, setbacks, generally speaking, to accommodate the larger number of units due to the number of affordable units.
Okay.
The complications with this property are there's sort of two directions to go. One, the non-conforming regulations, as broad overview, when a building is destroyed more than 50% of the current market value due to fire, which we know that this happened here, then it can be rebuilt in the same conditions so long as the use is not intensified. By doing density bonus, et cetera, it would intensify the use. Can that be an incentive? Would be a question for your team and your legal team. So anything like that you would maybe be proposing you would propose and we would confirm that we can accept it. So a lot of that happens on your end of what you'd like to do, because we can confirm and help evaluate what you're proposing, but we can't really guide what you should and shouldn't or can and can't propose.
Right.
In that case. But I can provide you with those regulations for non-conforming structures and what typically that would mean for any other project. In the case of density bonus law, going back to the waivers, you can waive a lot of zoning regulations. However, it does not necessarily override other life safety or external regulation. So in this case, we do have that 25-foot setback. The big question would be confirming that is in fact an objective standard, which I'm 80% sure that I'm 95% sure that yes, in fact, that is an objective standard. I talked to Public Works about that. That is in our zoning code. And if that, sometimes items from our zoning code come from building or public works regulations and they get incorporated there so that they are objective for every project. They weren't aware of if that came from public works. It was put in a long time ago, but they don't have any regulations on their side that just as a base standard would impede that construction. However, because it is a waterway that includes BCDC, as I sent in that email, did increase their jurisdiction, and we don't have control over that. So your team would need to coordinate with them for what they would allow. So how far into the canal you could build. Engineering, of course, will be a big question of
Sure.
that. It is an active waterway, so the canal itself is below sea level. So I know that we're seeing on other projects that are even closer to the freeway, they're needing to do a significant, really significant engineering to make those buildings sound. So that would be a big question of that as well. And Public Works didn't have any, besides those regulations, that's what they would respond to, but they didn't have any other concerns. So we can absolutely answer the question of if within our zoning code that is absolutely an objective standard and that can be waived. We would also want to have all that information regarding BCDC. I don't think that. I'm thinking of another, the Army, maybe that was for a bridge. We had another recent project that was building close to a creek, and they did have a bridge over, I believe the bridge itself. They did have to coordinate with the Army Corps of Engineers in that case. I couldn't say for sure for this project. I don't believe so, but BCDC would be the biggest.
Yeah, I've dealt with BCDC.
Yeah.
So could you repeat what you said about the Public Works setback requirement? Did you say they don't have a setback requirement?
So they default to our code in that case. So
okay.
yeah, so I had reached out to them to specifically ask if the zoning code section had come from a Public Works regulation and if they had any of their own regulations in conjunction with or on top of that, but they actually default to the zoning code and work within that. So which indicates that would in fact be considered an objective standard.
Okay. One thing I've noticed, and when I surveyed the site, was that the building directly to the west is 3 stories over parking. So it's quite a bit taller than the 36-foot high limit. And that was built, as I understand it, in the 60s, maybe. It's anyway. So somehow they were able to go much higher. Is that something that we can do ourselves, given the fact that they have already done it?
Whether or not another property has done it would not impact whether or not you could do it. However, that is the pretty baseline waiver that projects use when it comes to state density bonus law. So you're probably familiar with some of the other projects in San Rafael that are going up to 17 stories, certainly well above what the zoning code intended. So there are now a lot of, state density bonus law being the number one that you could go that direction. Whether, as you know, for this property, a lot was done prior to a lot of zoning codes. We had a really big overhaul of our code in 1991 and 2004. Right. So before 1991, the code is several pages. I mean, like 5, 6, 10 pages, as opposed to the 3-inch thick zoning code that we have now. So a lot was done before 1991 that we would not permit now. Those items, which is why we do have the non-conforming structure category to accommodate those buildings that probably were approved then, but just couldn't be now based on our code. We can grandfather in a lot of those regulations under our base regulations that it not increase the intensity of the site. That obviously gets more complicated when we now have these other avenues with state density bonus law, SB 330, et cetera.
Complicated.
Yeah.
Scott, Doug, any questions?
So objective standard, what exactly does that mean?
So objective standard is something that is not, well, for lack of a better opposite word, subjective. So we've reviewed a lot of items for those from the code. So previously, I mean, truly like 5 years ago, we would have paid closer attention, or we would have had a lot more regulations about landscaping, color, materials, et cetera. Objective standard, a lot of that has been not only removed from our code, but what is now considered the objective standards are just what we call development standards in our code and site and use regulations. So a good way to think about it would be measurable standards. So
like height, bulk, setbacks.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So anything that could not be
just hard numbers, essentially.
yeah, versus cohesive with the environment or
Right.
and even and in this case there's no trees on the lot, but landscaping as well. So there is an objective requirement for landscaping. That's also something typically that we've seen as a waiver to reduce the amount of landscaping at the site.
Right.
Okay, so you mentioned that the setback is an objective standard. Does that mean that that's hard and fast and there's no way around that?
So that's where the state density bonus waivers come in. So when you are proposing a building that has 10% units affordable to low income families, you get not only a density bonus of being allowed 20% more density in terms of units as you would otherwise. You're also then have the benefit of requesting an incentive or a concession, and then also waivers on top of that. So the best I can do is I can send you some guiding documents on that just explain it a little bit better, and sort of there's some good. The state has actually produced some good guiding documents on state density bonus law that help a lot with that. But in a waiver is when you would a concession would be, we need this item in order to accommodate these units. And waivers can be thought of more of like, these are the standards that would be difficult to follow to be able to have a building that reasonably accommodates this new level of density. That is setback height.
Right.
Yeah.
We used waivers on a project at 4th and Grand that had setbacks of 10 feet and we got 6 feet instead of 10. So yeah, I'm familiar with that whole issue. And that's the good news, that there is some flexibility. So one thing that really concerned me was this water district construction lines or whatever. Let me pull that up.
That DPW had sent that map.
Yeah, it's like that takes a third of the site, which is very worrisome. I mean, it's crazy. I can share my screen if you want, but it really literally takes a third of the site and says you can't build over it. Is that another line that could be subject to waivers?
I think that is a larger question that may have to be addressed on more of a legal side. DPW has that map on file, but where that map comes from and how applicable it is a little bit more gray. So anytime that there is a map like that, I'm going to guess it has more to do with the flooding and the intended flooding. In this case, it's absolutely a flood zone being so close to the canal and where it would be the most safe to build. That map is not incorporated into our code as an objective standard.
Okay.
So whereas that is probably preferred to follow, I can't absolutely say for sure. In public, I did specifically ask Public Works about that either. And they also, we would have to find how that has been certified.
Because
so
clearly no other building along this row has conformed to that. They're all building over it by a long way.
Yeah.
And is this a flood control? Is that the purpose of this for flood control? Because clearly, if we're doing parking on the ground floor, we will have to do certain measures, but it's not habitable space, so it's not an issue for flood control.
Yes, that is definitely it. I think confirming that map. So pre-applications are a little bit difficult because there's only so far we can go in doing the review. So the letter that we sent you is standard of how much information we can really give at that stage in terms of guiding documents and doing research. So that was TBW's comment that they provided. How deeply we can get into doing that research for this stage of the pre-application, I can confirm. So I will have to confirm that. So, but I do think that is very crucial map, whether or not that is something that needs to be followed and why. So again, going back to BCDC, I think that is probably your first place that you want to see with them, because they are going to have very likely more stringent regulations than we have, since they are focused on the Canal Way, which is not in our jurisdiction. So we have established those objective standards in order to prevent any obstruction into the canalway. But again, they're going to have the more complete data and they're going to have more input into why not, if you can, or if they, they could, who knows which way they'll go. So.
Have there been any projects subject to BCDC recently that you know of that face this problem?
So 20, the Loch Lomond development. So the overall Loch Lomond development worked very closely with BCDC when it came to, I believe, their seawalls. I know that I think the discussion may continue on some of the items, but they set back the residences pretty far from
Yes, that's
the
the
bay.
project. It's in my background for Scott and Doug's information.
Yeah. And another project that was not on, well, they didn't have to work with BCD. I'm trying to think of another. I can definitely ask around about if we've had a recent residential project on the water. I'm not sure that we have, because there are a lot of complications that come with building residential properties this close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if I have any other questions. Let me look at your response.
I'm just gonna turn away for a second to make a note about the map. Yeah. Because that is a good.
Yeah. So parking is not required, is what I gather, because of our proximity to transit, which I had assumed anyway. So that leaves us flexibility in the number of parking spaces that we provide, if any.
Yeah, what my more official answer would be is because of AB 2097, you would need to present that to us, provide the language to say that you would be invoking it. But in that law in AB 2097, when a new development is within a 1/2 mile of a high quality transit corridor, we cannot impose a minimum standard of parking. So that's,
Yeah, we dealt with the same thing on that project at 4th and Grand, where we had not by code not enough, but enough to satisfy the marketing concerns of the owner. Okay. Any other questions, Scott or Doug?
I've had other buildings in the canal. They generally require amenities. Renee, I don't think you can probably answer this question, but I think one of the main amenities we had with the prior building were the docks.
Yeah.
And so we, of course, would hope that we'd be able to get the authorities, BCDC, to approve those so we can have some amenities for this property. Otherwise, there doesn't seem to be really space to do anything there. And I assume that planning would want us to come up with something one way or another, right?
To have a docks as a usable outdoor space.
Right.
Right.
I will say
there was one before. There was one there.
There was one before.
Yeah.
Again, that would fall under the part of the property is in the water, but that portion of the property that's in the water is in our water district, which does prohibit. It actually prohibits dock. Well, it does not. It permits boat docking facilities, but so there's probably a little bit of language in there of which that would of how that would go, but it doesn't permit residential properties. But again, BCDC would be the big red tape on that one. I will say though that usable outdoor space is encouraged. It's very important, we feel, for living. It is, however, an objective standard in our code.
Right.
So to be transparent, it is an objective standard. I would say it's probably similar to parking in that it's a more amenable building if it has usable outdoor space. That can include balconies as well. Courtyards is something that we see a lot.
I think we probably meet the requirement as it's designed because there's a significant amount of outdoor plaza space that I think would qualify. But yeah, we've done decks as well as part of the apartments. What was I going to ask? Went in and out anyway. Oh, I wanted to know, so is there a limit to the number of waivers, or can we ask for as many as we want?
There is some language in the state density bonus law that I'm going to say, I don't think so. But
that's my take on it, but I wanted to get your take as well.
If there is, it is very high, but
Yeah.
I do not think that there is.
Right. Okay. Well, it seems like Scott and Doug, I mean, waivers are the key, and they can allow more height, more units, setback relaxing. Now the big question is BCDC and the waterway. So how strict are they going to be?
So I have a question, probably more so for Colin. What do you think a realistic timeline on getting an idea of where we can go with this project is? Maybe give me an outside amount of time before we can get past all of
6
these
months.
various.
Yeah, the problem is you just don't know what you're allowed to do until you get approved, and that's been my experience. And it'll take 6 months. We got to, prepare all the documents, submit them, have them reviewed, get comments back. I don't know, Renee, do you have any sense of that?
I'd say 6 months is from start to finish is not unreasonable. From when we receive the first application to when it goes through hearing, that would the SB 330 would really mark those dates on the calendar. So that's a benefit of it, and which is why it's utilized so often. But that also falls on you. So there's also a regulation for the applicant to submit within 180 days of submitting that SB 330 application. Part of our timeline is availability. So as far as we can get in the project, we do have to go with the schedule of Planning Commission in which I will say is very busy, and it can get busy, especially if we're looking towards the springtime. So just to keep that in mind, there's that piece of it we can't really control until we get closer to that timing date. I will say when we review an application, when we go through the completeness phase, we're also doing a preliminary consistency analysis. So we won't do a formal consistency analysis until we have a complete application. But when we're going through that completeness phase, we will identify any major issues that may come up. So you would have a better sense from us at the beginning of a project of, which direction we're going. So we want to bring a project to the Planning Commission that we fully support. So if we go down that road of preparing that project, we are not going to string you along with something that may not be approvable. So once those documents are submitted within that first 30 days of completeness review, you will either hear it from us. Well, there's always something. Typically, there's more that we need. I'm not sure I've ever seen a complete, but SB 330 is much more. You need a lot less to have a complete SB 330 application, but a complete formal application, I'm not sure I've actually ever seen one right off the bat. But part of that comes from us doing our consistency analysis, confirming that we have all the information we need in order to make that determination. But again, we wouldn't string, if we are seeing anything in that first review period that would be a major issue, we would let you know then.
Right.
And so you say 6 months is a reasonable period of time. What's the worst case scenario?
Well, worst case, so there, again,
Double
there's a lot of other factors. I'd say 6 months is not impossible. I should maybe clarify that more. It's not, it has happened when we have had projects that have come in. I will say those projects that have come in that have been able to fit into that timeline, some of it, again, is scheduling the commission. We can't always predict when we'll have quorum, what other items will be on the agenda. But the other piece of it is that those applications are coming in with a lot of background information already being done. Another piece of the puzzle is CEQA. So whether or not it's likely that this project will need a CEQA analysis, and infill class 32 is most common. So the more complete an application is, the earlier that we can get a consultant on board in coordination with yourselves as the project applicants to confirm that can happen as quickly as possible. So that is a piece of it. We try to have that happen concurrently with our other process. So we don't want that to extend the project in any way. But those are just all pieces to the puzzle that we can't absolutely confirm a timeline but you can give a general sense of the projects that we've done recently. We're certainly trying to keep them moving.
Do you think this project would be subject to environmental assessment, not an EIR? In other words, a negative deck or something less, less onerous than an EIR?
That may start with the conversation with BCDC. So, and the map with Public Works. So I can confirm. So just to sort of give, said it in the email, again, we can't really guide one way or the other, but I can answer objective questions. So I will follow up on that map of 516 Canal, follow up with that map with the Department of Public Works and just internally to confirm where that map came from and what its intention was. So if that map's intention was to protect the environment, that certainly would bring up more questions in that realm. The conversation with BCDC will make a really big difference as well. Their jurisdiction is just on the Canalway, but they do function under a different umbrella than we do. So what their comments on the property will be different. All of those factors will lead to whether or not a full level of an EIR is requested. I will say when it comes to residential projects, part of all of these state laws is to minimize that CEQA level review as much as possible. And in most cases of residential buildings that we've been doing so far, it's been a class 32 exemption for infill. So
what was that again? What do you
a
call
class 32 exemption for an
32?
infill exemption. So I can't absolutely confirm that would be the case for this project, but I can. We'll have some projects coming up in the next month or so that utilizes that infill exemption. So you can keep an eye out for projects that are coming up, and you can see sort of what we're looking for and what we ask of a consultant. Again, it cannot in any way confirm that would be the path, but I will just say typically when it comes to residential projects on vacant lots, that's what is used.
Right.
Okay, and Colin, what do you think a realistic estimate of how long it would take us to prepare the application, full application through all of the committees that we have to go through?
Well, tough question. At least 2 months, probably 3, because we really haven't. I mean, what I have submitted is very, very preliminary, and if we go up a story, there are some aesthetic considerations. It's a pretty stark looking building right now, but we wanted to just get an idea of, okay, can we get this many units on? And it looks like we can, and maybe more. So we got to sort of get a handle on what the actual number of units is going to be, how high the building is going to be, all that stuff. Then it takes probably about a month to put all those documents together that are required for the submittal. So I would say 3 months is probably what I need to get it all together.
Okay, so the 3 months, that's on top of the 6 months.
Correct.
Okay, so realistically, we're probably talking like a year to a year and a half before we'd be in a position to get moving on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably correct. That's been my experience lately. Yeah, it takes about a year to get something like this through all the way.
And are you able to give me some kind of a estimate of what these costs are going to be to get it to that stage?
I can, yes.
I don't expect an answer right now.
No, I'll have to put together a proposal and, think about how we're going to approach all this. But, and BCDC definitely is kind of a new curveball that I was not expecting to have to deal with.
And that's new since we sent that letter, I think, or since DPW reviewed it. So that is very new in the last 8 weeks.
And my experience is it kind of depends on who personally you're dealing with at BCDC. There can be people who are difficult and people who are trying to, get you across the finish line. So that's like a big wild card. Just in my experience.
Yeah, I've seen it too. So no surprises there.
Yeah.
Doug,
Okay,
any
well,
questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Do you want to talk after this, Doug and Scott, just to pursue it further, or were we good until I get something together for you?
Why don't you put something together? If Doug and I come up with some other questions, we'll shoot you an email and try and set something up.
Okay, sounds good.
All right,
All right,
thank you,
well, thanks,
Renee.
Renee. I appreciate it.
Thank you all as well.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, we'll talk
Take care.
soon. Bye.
Take
Goodbye.
care.
Bye.